Popularly known as the Kingdom in the Sky, this is Lesotho. Lesotho is a small mountainous country in southern Africa completely surrounded by the Republic of South Africa. With a population of about 2 million people, Lesotho is one of the world's poorest countries most affected by HIV and AIDS. Since the first case was reported in 1986, HIV prevalence has continued to escalate without any signs of decline. The proportion of people living with the virus increased from an estimated 4% in 1993 to 25% in 1999 and reached 31% in 2002, making Lesotho the third country in the whole world with the highest HIV prevalence. At the beginning of 2003, 1/3 of the adult population was said to be infected with HIV. In 2005, HIV prevalence among the 15 to 49 age group was estimated at 23.2%. According to a report published by UNAIDS and the government of Lesotho in 2005, the number of people living with HIV increased from 264,000 in 2003 to 266,000 in 2005. The impact of the pandemic on Lesotho's growth and development is devastating. Human resource capacity within government, private sector and civil society organizations is getting eroded as more and more educated, middle-aged and working-class citizens are lost to AIDS. The government and the people of Lesotho are committed to fighting the HIV and AIDS pandemic. Significant financial, technical and logistical resources have been mobilized by the government, donors, United Nations agencies, international and national NGOs, private sector, faith-based organizations, people living with HIV and AIDS and communities to scale up the fight against HIV and AIDS in the country. In September 2004, ActionAid International, Southern Africa Partnership Program, and the government of Lesotho signed a Memorandum of Understanding to implement the Support to International Partnership Against AIDS in Africa, SIPA program.
The SIPA program was designed to strengthen processes by which governments, civil society organizations, donors, and other development actors working on HIV/AIDS are enabled to work together more effectively to scale up the response against HIV/AIDS in Africa. In Lesotho, the main focus of the SIPA program was to strengthen the capacity of civil society organizations, organization of people living with HIV/AIDS, decentralized structures, and the capacity of the National AIDS Commission to be able to coordinate and manage the national response more effectively.
The SIPA program was funded by the British Department for International Development, DFID. It was implemented in Lesotho from September 2004 until March 2006. During the 21 months of implementation, SIPA made substantial contribution towards strengthening the capacity for management and coordination of the national HIV and AIDS response in Lesotho. The program supported the establishment of the National AIDS Commission, NAC, through technical assistance, training, exposure visits for NAC staff, and provided funding for key activities of NAC.
Virtually, NAC establishment started with only the chief executive in place, and that was shortly followed by having an MNE person in place. So all what it meant is NAC needed some human resources to work with, and the technical support or assistance we had from SIPA came handy at that time.
The greatest success of SIPA program was enhancing the greater and meaningful involvement of people living with HIV and AIDS in the national HIV and AIDS response. In collaboration with UNAIDS and National AIDS Commission, SIPA facilitated and provided logistical, technical, and financial support towards the establishment of Lesotho Network of People Living with HIV and AIDS, LENEPWA. LENEPWA was launched on 27 May 2005 and mandated to mobilize and amplify the voices and role of people living with HIV and AIDS in the national response. Following the official launch, SIPA provided funding for the establishment of LENEPWA National Secretariat. Additionally, SEPA supported the development of LINEPO's 5-year strategic plan, annual work plan and budget, human resources management policy, financial management guidelines and code of conduct for management of support groups. SEPA also provided a full-time advisor to LINEPO to strengthen management and governance capacity.
LINEPO is now recognized both nationally, regionally, and internationally. As a result of this recognition, funding agencies are now able to finance LINEPO directly, because now LINEPO has systems in place which are very encouraging for financial institutions and financing agencies. This, I must say, has been a result of both the technical and financial support of SEPA Lesotho.
The establishment of LINEPO marked the beginning of a new chapter in the empowerment of people living with HIV and AIDS in Lesotho.
By empowerment, it means being represented, and the PLWAs are well represented in key decision-making bodies like the CCM, which is the country coordinating body, and the UN theme group. It's a UN theme group on HIV and AIDS. And in the CCM, our General Secretary is the co-chair. And also we were represented in the international conference like the 14th ICASA conference, which is the International Conference on AIDS and STIs in Africa, which was held in Abuja, Nigeria, late last year. I was there myself and the General Secretary, Mr. Thomas Muniz.
Exposure visits, participation in international forums, and training programs are instrumental in strengthening the capacity for management and coordination of the national HIV and AIDS response. The SEPA program facilitated and sponsored learning visits to South Africa, Botswana, Ghana, Kenya, and Uganda. Over 40 people representing government, civil society organizations, private sector, people living with HIV and AIDS, faith-based organizations, and academicians participated in inter-country learning visits. Following learning visits, a number of workshops were held in Lesotho to share the lessons, practices, and experiences of other countries.
I think the visits to Kenya and Uganda, such exposure brought us an experience of how to actually trickle down project benefits to the clients at community level. And other benefits are the partnership that we strike with other viable NGOs or successful NGOs like TASO.
HIV and AIDS counselors from Lesotho traveled to Uganda for Skills Enhancement Attachment Program with TASO. In addition to partnerships, new initiatives and structures emerged from learning visits. Lesotho Interreligious AIDS Consortium and Lesotho Association of HIV and AIDS Professional Counselors were formed and registered as NGOs following lessons learned from Uganda and Kenya. These new structures opened up new opportunities for resource mobilization, information sharing, networking, and coordination of HIV and AIDS activities. SEPA supported a number of training programs, learning visits, workshops, conferences, and staff exchange programs in efforts to develop skills and abilities of representatives of civil society organizations, government, faith-based organizations, private sector, and organizations of people living with HIV and AIDS. The program brought to Lesotho experienced regional trainers from other countries. These trainers were teamed up with local trainers to offer appropriate courses and follow-up. Over 300 people working on HIV and AIDS issues at national, district, and community levels were trained. The training courses covered HIV and AIDS project proposal writing, strategic planning, monitoring and evaluation, psychosocial counseling, peer counseling, budgeting, report writing, and leadership. The program supported the development of training materials and a pool of national trainers. A manual on planning and management of decentralized HIV and AIDS response and monitoring and evaluation guidelines were developed and made available to support district AIDS task forces. Generic guidelines on documentation and learning on HIV and AIDS were developed to strengthen documentation and learning of HIV and AIDS program work. In collaboration with Lesotho Council of NGOs, LCN, SEPA supported a nationwide mapping and capacity assessment exercise of civil society organizations involved in HIV and AIDS activities. Following recommendations from the capacity assessment study, SEPA supported the development of a civil society capacity building strategy and training materials to address gaps identified by the study. The capacity building program implemented by SEPA had a comparative advantage over other actors working with people living with HIV and AIDS, civil society organizations, and decentralized structures. The program received overwhelming support from several government departments and development partners.
The issue that we have been really working with SEPA in one important area which has not been given a lot of attention in the past, and that is strengthening civil society participation in the area of HIV/AIDS. In this country, we had not had any key player that was outstanding as SEPA in terms of strengthening civil society. And for us as UNAIDS, we found a very good partner at that level, and that is why our partnership just sparked off and was extremely productive.
The legacy of SEPA lies in its focus on groups neglected in the national HIV and AIDS response. There is need for more financial, technical, and material resources to sustain SEPA initiatives.
From ActionAid's point of view, a key sustainability strategy has been the decision to establish ActionAid International Program in Lesotho. And therefore, the initiatives that have been started and supported under the SEPA will be mainstream within ActionAid's program work over the longer term.
Sustainable capacity building requires long-term interventions and engagement with institutions whose capacity is being built. The implementation of SEPA program created strategic partnerships, networks, and opportunities. The government and people of Lesotho are very grateful to the Department for International Development, DFID, ActionAid International, and a host of other development partners for bringing about increased recognition of the importance of coordination, partnerships, and learning from each other.